Pastor Andrew Isker is going to be our next speaker. Andrew's something of a wallflower. Just a quiet and calm man. No, Andrew has written a couple of books, one being The Boniface Option that was already mentioned this morning. If you haven't read that, what are you even doing? You got to read that. Are there copies of it here for sale? I haven't even walked out there.
I have some in my van.
He's got some in his van. He also has candy in there. It doesn't have any windows, but it's just kind of a white van. So maybe check it out. Check it out later on. Now, Andrew's the pastor of 4th Street Evangelical Church in Tim Walls' Minnesota. Is it? It's not. We're not giving him the state. Never mind. Okay. And if you're voting to get him in office, it's more pulled pork for the rest of us because you're probably a vegan. So look forward to Andrew. Look forward to hearing from you today, brother. Come on up.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I guess while everybody's still coming in, I'll tell a story before I get into the meat of everything here. This week I had a post go viral on X, formerly Twitter, and there's a secret to going viral. It got about 1 million views, and there's a secret to it, and that is there is no secret at all. You just post lots of stuff, anything you find that is interesting or funny or whatever. Well, I found this post where someone had done all the research on that ad for Kamala Harris, the Man Enough ad where all these actors are like, oh, I could deadlift 500 pounds, and I'm like, no, you can't. And someone had done all the research on it. And I saw your pastor, Tim Bushong, had posted this on Facebook. So this is what you do. You assume, well, he got it from somewhere else. So I'll take it and post it. And I put it on Twitter. And all I said was nothing profound. I just said, this is so funny. And and then, 20,000 likes later, And Tim messages me a couple days later. He's like, dude, I did that. I wrote that whole thing up. That was me. And you stole it. And you got all those views and I did it. And I'm like, well, that's just how it works. Sorry. That's right. That's right. So I shamelessly stole that from him, and now I'm giving him the credit. So anyway, I'm here today to talk about Jesus and politics. That's our topic of discussion this morning. And I didn't know, Tim didn't tell me, okay, how much time do you get? How long are you going to go? So I preach a lot, every Sunday, and my sermons just go as long as they go. Sometimes, Ben and Anna could tell you, my wife could tell you, maybe it'll be 40 minutes, maybe it'll be an hour 15. So just until we're done. So thankfully you got a break because lunch might be a little later. But yes, our topic is politics, and before we just get into politics, the idea of the political, like everyone is concerned about politics. Less than 3 weeks away from a presidential election, maybe the most significant one. I mean, they always say that every time. This one I think actually is, but we don't really ever think about the term politics or the political, what it is. We just think, well, it's voting, or it's one party versus another. Or maybe if you're really nerdy, you get into political ideology, things like that. But really, at its most fundamental level, it's simply the governance of human societies. Right? That's all it is. It's like many other things. It comes from the Greeks. Right? The word politics is from the polis, right? The Greek city-state. And so for them, that is what the political was built around. The maintenance, the governance of the polis. Right? So if you read Aristotle, you read Plato, this is what they are talking about. But the way that Christians have approached this over the centuries advanced beyond the Greeks. Of course, they took Greek thoughts and that often guided our Christian fathers, but they advanced far beyond what the Greeks and Romans left. And so the question of what is the political, right? How are human societies organized and governed? Throughout Christian history, maybe you'd hear about things like the thought of Thomas Aquinas, right? You could just go down the road to South Bend to hear all about Thomas Aquinas quite a bit. But by the Reformation, right, his answers were built upon and revised into a form, at least that we nominally live under today, the form of federalism. Right, where that came, it didn't just show up in America like, oh, we're going to have a constitution now. Isn't that great? This is totally new and unique. No, it came from somewhere. It came from somewhere else. And so most American Reformed Christians, and even more American Christians, and probably all Americans, except for a tiny little few, have ever heard the name Johannes Althusius, right? You hear that, like, ooh, that sounds like a weird name. Who is that? But without this man, there would not have been a United States Constitution. There wouldn't have been a conception, just the idea in people's heads of something like federalism. And so I have a personal, fondness for Althusius, for Johannes Althusius. My paternal lineage is of German Reformed pastors. My great-great-grandfather was a German Reformed pastor when they emigrated to the United States. And he came from this little East Frisian town of Greetsiel, really small. My parents went to it actually this summer and went to church, the same church that my great-great-grandfather preached in. And that town is just a few miles away from the city of Emden, where Althusius rose to prominence. And this man, he formulated in the 16th century this concept of federalism, right? We think of federalism, and you hear the word federalism, and you think of, right, politics, the American federal government, but it's just a Latin word that means covenant. It's just a Latin word for covenant. And so his conception of how civil society, how human society would function, how it's ordered, is covenantal, right? It's obviously very, very Christian concept, right? Which makes it really fascinating, right? When the people who are like, no, Christian nationalism is this horrible thing. It's so terrible. It's this bizarre, crazy, extremist thing. And it's like, right, the very basis of the system they at least say that we live under is using Christian words, right? Federalism, that's where it comes from Christians, from Reformed Christians in Europe during the Reformation. And so the basic, for Althusius, the basic political unit for him was, unlike the Greeks, not the polis, right? What do you think it was? Right? What do you think the basic political unit is for this reformed system of politics, right? Not the polis, not the state or the city-state, the family, right? The family. That's the fundamental building block of governance, right? You have a father who is the head of his family, of his household, right? And covenantally, he's the head, right? Whatever happens in the family, he is responsible for. And from there, right, you have the local community. In the Bible, you would see this in tribes or clans, like the tribes of Israel. They would form communities. They'd form towns and cities. And Althusius' concept is a little bit different than what developed in America, because it wasn't this radically individualized system. It was rather, right, you'd have layers of autonomy, right? The family has autonomous authority or semi-autonomous authority, right? The city doesn't get to tell you how you raise your kids. The government or the king doesn't get to tell you how you raise your kids. The father, he's in charge of that. The city takes care of city things. They have autonomy for that. And then you go a further level up, right? The king or the prince or whatever polity you're in, right? He doesn't get to tell the city, okay, you need to direct the public funds to build this road and not that one. No, that's within the authority of the local community. And so you have almost competing, and not necessarily competing, authorities within this system. where they have their own domains, their own functions, and then they're brought together and united toward common purpose, right? That is how Christian federalism worked, right? That's how it would operate. And so you think about that, right? You think about what that looks like in this conception of the political in the Reformation, and think about our society today, right? How different it is, right? How different it is today, right? Today, it's difficult to advance this kind of political thought, to say, no, actually, I get to be in charge of my children, my family, not you. You don't get to tell them what goes in my children's bodies or what parts get taken off of my children's bodies, right? That's you don't have that authority. That is mine. I am their father, right? They treat that as radical. You are extremists if you believe that, or if you say, no, I don't want the federal government to tell my city, right, where we can build a road or how we have to spend money, right? But that's radical too. Right? You're not allowed to do that. Right? Everything is from the top down. Right? Everything is centralized authority. And the reason for this isn't simply because, well, the people with power took this power and they never gave it back. Well, of course, yes, that has happened. But we don't really ever ask the question, why? Right? Why has this happened? Why is it like this? The reason why is that each one of these layers within this reformed conception of political theory has been eaten away, right? Starting with the family, right? So the basic political unit, the family, right? It's been actively eroded, right? It wasn't by accident. You just wake up one day and say, I guess we're just not going to have families anymore. I guess we're going to have lots of divorce and single parents and children that don't know their fathers, right? That didn't just magically happen. Someone did that. Right? Someone actively pursued that as a strategy for our society. Right? People pass laws to make it this way. Right? Marriage has been legally stripped away by no-fault divorce. Right? Maybe you know this, maybe you don't. About a third of children in the United States of America today are raised by a single parent. Right? 1 in 3. 1 in 3. And among the 2/3, the children raised by both parents, right, for the majority of them, you know this, rearing of them has been outsourced to other parties, right? They aren't raised in their home by their mother and their father, right? Usually, like right after birth, what happens? Boom, you go to daycare. And then you stay in daycare until, right, you get free daycare, public schools, right? That's what and you're raised by the government. Right? And they tell your children what to think, what to love, what to hate, and so on and so forth. And so the household today, right, rarely resembles what you would see in the pages of Scripture. Right? You read Ephesians, or you read 1 Timothy, how Paul describes the household, right? And like you read in a normal, right? We're not normal, but in a normal evangelical church, right? The pastor approaches this, and there's no connection point to how, if he even is willing to engage in discussing Ephesians or 1 Timothy, right? What's he going to say? We don't have households, right? How are you going to teach them about, the father is the head of the man is the head of the woman? Like, how are you going to teach people that, right? We don't have that anymore, right? A father has almost no authority in his home, right? Legally. If his wife doesn't like what he's doing, disagrees with him about something, doesn't like how he votes, right? She just leave, right? No questions asked. She's gone, and half or more of his stuff and his kids go with her. Right? He has no authority. Right? He's got this sword of Damocles of no-fault divorce hanging over his head constantly. Right? So living under that regime is where we're at. And husband and wife within what we call a household today, right? They aren't husband and wife. They're just economic human resource 1 and 2. And again, like I said earlier, parental authority is greatly diminished, right? Whether it's vaccine mandates or social services hounding you for homeschooling, or as is in the case in my state, and hopefully not, but maybe very soon, the whole country. Right? Your children can be taken away from you and transitioned against your will. And so to the extent that the family even still exists in our society, in terms of how it has existed historically, right, its political autonomy as a political unit has been stripped away. Right? So when I say the family doesn't exist, I don't mean like your families, obviously they exist. But generally, the concept as a whole within an entire society, it's gone. It's gone. And then, right, so that's the family. The second part, the next part up in the Althusian federal system is the community, the village, the town, the city. I'll sound like Tim Walz. I grew up in a small town. Right? I grew up proud of that service. But I grew up in a small town, and my wife, she grew up in a large city. But in cities, right, the older people here might be able to tell you, there used to be neighborhoods in cities, right, that were like small towns, just really large, right? So you had your local neighborhood, you knew everyone. Your father grew up with all the same kids, and they all stayed in the same place. My father too. I mean, driving around as a little kid, my dad would be like, "Yeah, that used to be this thing over here. Maybe your dad's did this. That's gone now." Or he would talk about, "Yeah, that guy used to work for my dad." And everywhere you go in town, if you went to the grocery store, I hated going to the grocery store after church, not because I was a tiny little Sabbatarian. Although that's, we shouldn't have been going. But because, right, if we had to just get one jug of milk, it would take 2 hours. Because my dad would talk to everybody in there, because he knew everyone, right? He goes 5 feet. "Oh, hey, how you doing? What's, you still working over there? How's that going?" And he'd have little 10, 15-minute conversations with like 20 different people. And I hated it. As a child. Now I'm like, oh, it's so lovely, so quaint, so wonderful. Yeah. That doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't exist anymore. Or if it does, in little ways. Right? The idea of living in a place where you have deep, deep roots has died away. Right? It's gone. In my wife's case, right, the neighborhood she grew up in used to be, right, her father was, is Polish, was Catholic, isn't Catholic anymore, but grew up Polish Catholic. And everyone in that neighborhood in St. Paul, Minnesota was a Polish Catholic. They had St. Casimir's Church. That's where all the weddings were, all the funerals were, where everything was. It was the center of the community. But now, they've since left, and now that community is almost entirely Hmong and Somali, and it's gone, right? St. Casimir's Church is still there, but it's in poor repair. And I think maybe she can correct me, I think it's been closed down by the diocese. That community is gone. It does not exist anymore in the way that it once did, in the way that it once did for many, many generations. And why is that, right? Why is that? Well, I mean, we can blame it on globalism, right? We can blame it on globalism, and we should. Because the economic opportunities, right, that allowed that community to exist, where everyone went and they worked at a factory, they worked a job where they could provide for a household. My wife's grandma, she had medical issues and couldn't work, but even if she didn't, she wouldn't have. She would have stayed home and raised their children. My wife's father and his siblings. That doesn't exist at all anymore, right? If you wanted to live in that neighborhood today, even in the state of poverty that it's in, right, both mom and dad would have to work to be able to afford a home in that neighborhood. Right? It's not possible to live there for normal people any longer. And so if you want to make good money and you live in a small town like I grew up in and still live in for now, or if, right, you wanted to live in that neighborhood, right, you had to leave. You had to go somewhere else to make big money, good money, to be able to provide for a family. You have to go to the big city. And so everyone becomes this atomized mercenary, right, just bouncing from suburb to suburb to suburb, right, with each new job. and you never really become part of a community, and neither do any of your neighbors, right? All the people around you are in this exact same condition where it's like, all right, we're going to live here for 3 to 5 years, then I'll get a promotion and move to Milwaukee or move to Seattle or move wherever. And everyone is just biding their time until they go somewhere else. Right? There is no community. You go to the grocery store and nobody knows who you are. You don't know who anybody else is. And most people actually like it that way, right? You can go get the milk and you're out in 5 minutes. It's great. You just do the self-checkout, you're gone. You don't even have to talk to anyone. Right? That is the condition of most of our communities today. Now, small town Indiana like this is probably not quite so stark, but for most of the country, that is the way that it is. Right? You don't spend time around people you've known since you both were in diapers. Right? You don't spend time around people that knew your parents when they were young. Right? You don't spend time with people you went to elementary school with. Right? You are alone in a sea of thousands or tens of thousands of people. And so you feel this. Right? You feel like you are just a number on a spreadsheet. And so, right, the very, very few local communities anymore where everyone is there, they aren't actually a local, right? Even, right, they brought up Tim Walz, so I'll talk about him a little bit, right? He's like, oh, my hometown is Mankato, Minnesota. And it's like, no, it's not. You were born in Nebraska and grew up in Nebraska. You are not from here, right? He pretends like he likes the Vikings. He probably can't even name a single player on the team, unlike Tim Bouchon. He can. Right? He's not one of us, right? And even my mom, right? My mom grew up in a small town an hour away from ours. And she's lived there for 40 years. And her entire life, she'll say today, I just don't feel like I'm a Wasecan, right? I'm not one of you. I'm a foreigner. Right? Even though, right, she's just as German and Scandinavian as everyone else, right? Speaks the same way, talks the same way, says "ope" when she bumps into people, right? But she's not one of us, of Wasecans, right? She doesn't feel that way. And for many of the communities, that's the way it is. Like, everyone has come from somewhere else. They're living there because it's a nice place to live, but they don't have roots, right? Where we live about an hour. A 5-minute walk from the cemetery where all of my relatives are buried, and there's 6 generations of Iskers buried in that cemetery, Woodville Cemetery, about a mile from our house. Right, we have roots in this place. Right, that's why it's very painful to leave it. We have roots here, but most people don't have roots like that, or if they do, they despise them. They don't like them. They're itching to leave. And so our communities are not places where people have this same shared way of life, right? The same history, right? I can look at buildings in the town that were owned by my great grandfather, and you feel a sense of pride in that. My great grandpa owned that building, right? He owned that big, beautiful brick warehouse. That was our family's, right? I can drive down the road and see where they lived, right? I knew this place. In this deep way. People don't have that any longer. We don't have the same history. We don't have the same sense of place. We don't have the same purpose and pride for our place, right? These places, they're just merely a geographic location where you just happen to live at the moment, right? You got a good interest rate and you bought some property and here you are, right? That's how people think of home today, right? To have this kind of local autonomy that you would find in the Bible, right? The kind that Althusius describes in his Politics, right? The kind that the Althusian federal system is based on, right? You just can't have a random collection of human beings, right? A community like that has no authority, no autonomy. And so you can see why it's very, very easy for the federal government to say, all right, if you want this highway money, or if you want this money for your school, you're going to do what we say, right? It's easy for their authority, their local autonomy to be eroded because the basis of it, right, the unity of the people, the shared purpose, right, the collective identity of that community, that is gone. So who cares, right? We just want the grant. Right? We just want the money. And so finally, right, this is where we'll spend a good deal of time. Right, the last one, right? Well, the very last one for Althusius is the empire, and we won't. That's maybe next year Tim will have me here and we'll talk about empire. But the one before that is the nation or the commonwealth. Right, that's the top of the system. And so, ironically, it's maybe the most controversial question today. Right, forget about Matt Walsh's "What is a woman?" Right, that's. I mean, it's funny. Right, it's a funny documentary. Right, the much harder question to ask today is, what is a nation? Right, what is a nation? Right, America, we are told. Right, if you watch the Democratic Convention or President Joe Biden, he's still president. You always forget about that. Right, America is an idea. It's just an idea. It's just an idea, like the Pythagorean theorem or something like that, right? Just a intellectual concept, right? That's what they say America is, right? Anyone can become an American, right? All 8 billion people on planet Earth, they have a right to become an American. They just have to happen to end up on the magic dirt of America, and boom, you're an American. But is that true? Right? Is that true? Is America just an idea, or is it a people? Right? Is it a people with a shared history, a shared heritage, a shared purpose, right? Shared ideas, shared way of life, right? That's what defines a nation. And of course, the answer is yes, it is. It always has been. It always has been. Of course, America admittedly is a unique place. Right? It was largely, right, this is a point of controversy, it was a largely unsettled territory. Right? Of course, yes, it had Aboriginal people, but it didn't have, at least in North America, it didn't have civilization, the way we would define it, cities, industry. Right? It was largely, even with the people there, it was largely empty territory that needed to be settled. And many peoples, mostly from Western Europe, came. Right? The English, the Dutch, the Scots-Irish, the Germans. But they didn't remain the exact same way that they were. They became something new. Though they all began to speak the same language, they all began to speak English. We're speaking it today. They all followed the same Anglo-Saxon common law tradition. They all, with a few exceptions, were mostly Protestant Christians of different varieties. And they conquered and built a civilization on this continent. They built a nation. And over the course of hundreds of years, many peoples continued to come and settle and populate the nation, and they were assimilated into the same way of life. Right? My ancestors came in the 1870s and 1880s, mostly from Germany, but also Scandinavia, mostly due to the Franco-Prussian War. And right, they spoke German, and now we don't anymore. All we speak is English. We assimilated into the way of life of this people. Right? Only a generation later, their sons went to war. Right? My ancestors went to war against Germany, right? Against the country they came from as Americans, right? They wore USA on their uniforms, they spoke English, and they fought and died for this country, this people. They were fully assimilated into being Americans, right? This is the history of America, right? This is the history of our people, right? They assimilated into our way of life. And today, right, you're not allowed to care about this or think of it in these terms whatsoever, right? You are supposed to believe that these people that came here, the men in Jamestown, right, the Pilgrims, the Puritans, all the people that built the colonies, right, all the people that settled places like Indiana, right, you are supposed to believe that those people were evil, right? That is what you're supposed to believe. They were evil for creating America, right? You're supposed to believe that America is merely an idea, that all 8 billion people on planet Earth have a right to be here, right? To live here, a right to take your tax money, right? You're supposed to believe that. Right? The concept that Americans are a distinct and particular people, right? Where certainly a limited number of foreign people can continually be grafted in, right? That idea, even that idea, right? That you can have people come and assimilate, they can become part of you, right? Even giving that caveat, that idea is forbidden. You are not allowed to believe that. And so, I'll give a little vignette here from Tolkien, right? It wouldn't be a Reformed conference unless someone would reference Tolkien. But and I'll just from the movies, right? It's not really, I mean, the line is adapted from the books. But from the first movie, The Fellowship of the Ring, right? When Boromir gets hit with the arrows, right? And he's laying there dying, right? And he's despairing. What's he saying, right? The world of men will fall, and all will come to darkness. My city to ruin. Right? What does Aragorn say to him? Right? He's holding him. I'm going to start crying. Right? It's like, whoa. I do not know what strength is in my blood, but I swear to you, I will not let the White City fall, nor our people fail. And what does Boromir say? Right? In his dying gasps. Our people. Right? He's like, our people. Right? I would have followed you. Right? And he calls him my king. Right? It's great. Right? We see this movie, a powerful scene. Right? I'm getting misty. I don't do that ever. Right? If you know me, I don't do that. Right? Aragorn, right? He'd been estranged from his people. Right? The people of Gondor. Right? He is the rightful heir of that kingdom, but he's cut off. And, at least in the Jackson films, this is a criticism. People, if you're a Tolkien nerd, right, this is a criticism you're going to have. But he changes it. He changes the scene from the book. And Aragorn is reticent to take up the crown. In the books, he's not. But in the movies, he is. And Boromir, in the movie, at his dying moments, he sees Aragorn admit, finally, that he is the king. That these are his people. That they are from the same people, and he has a loyalty and a duty to them to defend them, to not see them fall. And that's what he promises him in that scene. And of course, if you use the same language today, right, that Aragorn does or Boromir does, right, if you say our people, right, what will happen? People will lose their minds. Our people? What are you talking about, our people? Have you ever read Galatians 3:28? Our people? You don't have a people, right? There's neither Jew nor Greek. You don't have a people. Right? That's what people say. That's what, constantly, all the time. And so, I'm going to say something extremely controversial, right? People on the internet won't like it. Right? Individual people can join a people over time, right? You see this in the Bible, usually through marriage. But not always, right? People can assimilate. I was just in Tennessee where we're going to be moving, and in this small town, there's not a lot of restaurants. We'd gone to every single one, and so we finally went to the Mexican restaurant in town, like every small town has, right? And one of the waiters there was fascinated, right? He met us. He's like, "Where are you guys from?" You could tell immediately we're not from there, and we said, "Well, we're going to be moving to town." And he, of course, was born in Mexico, but had lived in this town for decades, and clearly loved being there, loved the people, loved that place. And he said something very interesting. Right? He's telling us about the history of the town. He's telling us all about the town and how much he loves it and how great it is. And he said, right, in his very thick Mexican accent, right, on the one side of the river, they were all Union. And on this side of the river, we were Confederates. And we would be shooting the cannons at them over the river, and they would shoot them at us. And, right, I hear this, and I'm like, wait, we? Us? What are you talking? Right, you weren't here for that. But I think about that, I'm like, wait, neither was I. We were in Germany in the 1870s. Right, his family obviously wasn't here for the Civil War, right? But what's his identity is as a member of this town, this place. Right? They have become his people. His people. And I mean, I thought he was going to start, singing Dixie in his Mexican accent. John, where's John? He would like that. But over time, of course, right? He's here now, and he loves the place and loves the people, and his children, and his children's children, and his children's children's children, right, will become more and more engrafted into this people, right? But the same is not true when you have millions or tens of millions of people all at once introduced to a place, right? They make no effort to assimilate, nor are they incentivized to. Or there's no reason to. Why would you? Right? America, it's an idea. It's merely an economic zone for them to take advantage of. Right? If I will think about it from a different perspective, because it's hard to, as Americans, we're just used to it. We're just used to it. But if I, as a teenager, I had been really into anime and Japanese stuff, and somehow when I came of age, somehow managed to get a hold of the extremely scarce visa to live in Japan. I could go there. I'd learn to speak Japanese. I'd learn their way of life, their customs, what you do, what you don't do, right? How to be polite. They're very polite people. How do you live among them? Their customs, but no matter what I could dress the same way they do. I could speak their language. I could eat all the same food, do everything that they do. But would have I ever, at any point, been considered, Japanese? Right? Maybe you've seen the Tom Cruise movie, The Last Samurai. Right? Then you'd never be considered Japanese, ever. It's different than America, admittedly. They wouldn't view me as one of them. Right? Maybe I would marry a Japanese woman and have half Japanese children, and then 3/4 Japanese grandchildren, and then 7/8 Japanese great-grandchildren. And maybe then they would finally consider me in my line, right, Japanese. It would take a long time to integrate into a distinct people like that. But even there, it would be possible, no matter how slim, right? It would be possible to do that. And why is it possible? Right? Because they have a people, right? Very self-consciously, they know what a Japanese person is, right? What is an American? We don't really know, right? What is a Japanese person? They know. They know exactly what it is. A place like that, it's possible. Now, of course, if I, along with 20,000 Midwesterners, are just airdropped into a small town in Japan, right, we would never become Japanese in the way I just described. It would never happen, right? We would just have a little America, right? We would be eating cheeseburgers and watching NFL football in our little town, and it's just geographically located in Japan. Right? We would never assimilate. We'd never have a reason to. We're just there. We have a good life. We get to continue being Americans. It's pretty nice. We get some really fresh sushi whenever we want it, but aside from that, we're still Americans. And so if you think about that in our context, right, in the context of mass migration, right, you would hate that if you were Japanese to happen to your country, to have have pockets of foreign people that are there that are never becoming your people, right? They would always be foreign to you, right? And you wouldn't hate it because I really hate those foreigners. Maybe they would hate Americans because we had a war and it didn't go well for them. But it wouldn't be because you hate Americans, you hate all these foreigners, but because you love Japan, you love your people, you love your history, you love where you came from, right? Not because you hate the other people, but because you love your people. And so mass migration is the final ultimate means to destroy a people, right? To turn a nation into a mere collection of undifferentiated, random individuals with nothing whatsoever binding them together, right? All just living in an economic zone, right? How I described a community, how I describe families, right? You are just a mere individual bouncing around, bumping into other mere individuals. And you think about these conditions, what they look like, what it's like to have a world like that, right? It happens first because the people have been worn down and socially engineered to reject the idea that their nation actually is a nation, that they have ancestors that have left them an inheritance that they have to carry forward to their posterity, right? You're trained to reject all of that, right? The U.S. Constitution, what does it say, right? Why did they form the United States of America, right? To secure the blessings of liberty for us and our posterity, right? For our children, But that kind of thinking is de facto illegal in America today. You wouldn't be allowed to write the U.S. Constitution today. It's probably hate speech, actually, or maybe soon will be. Right? If Tim Walz gets his way, it definitely will be. Right? There is the absolute necessity, right, to finally replace a people. Right? This is the precondition. Right? This is absolutely necessary. Right? In order, if you didn't have this, right, if you still had an America that had an identity that said we are Americans, we love America, and you bring in 40 million people from all over the world, right, they would reject that. They would violently revolt if you tried to do that. Before you can do that, what do you have to do? You have to wear a people down and make them think we don't have a country. Right? Or if we did, they were really evil and bad. And they did evil, horrible stuff, worse than everybody else in all of history. And so we deserve to have it destroyed. And so, recently, I was at a conference in Texas, and Dr. Paul Gottfried was there, and he made a fascinating point. I had never actually put this together or considered it, but he's very, very familiar with Germany and even contemporary German politics, especially the politics of the Cold War. And in Germany today, maybe some of you are familiar with this, right? Maybe you really care a lot about European politics. But in Germany, there's a political party called Alternative for Deutschland, right, AfD, and right, that's the anti-immigration party, right? The same thing that's happening in America is happening there, right? They're importing millions of Muslims into their country, and people don't like it. Weird. And this party is very popular in parts of Germany. In parts of Germany, right? Germany, throughout the second half of the 20th century was divided, east and west. And so where do you think AfD is its most popular? Right? In free, democratic West Germany, or East Germany that was under totalitarian rule for 60 years? Right? East Germany. Right? East Germany. And this is the point that Dr. Gottfried made, is that we think of the post-war occupation of Germany during the Cold War as, right, got the Soviets over there, and they're just pounding, just grinding down, and they were just grinding. They're imprisoning people. They got the Stasi, the secret police, everywhere, watching everyone over their neighbors, reporting them. Right, people are going to prison, going to gulags, being tortured, being killed. Right, it's awful, horrible, brutal. Right, we know about that. We think, oh, that occupation, that was horrible, that was terrible. But there also was a second occupation of Germany after the war, and really all of Europe, and that was done by the United States. By the United States. And what did they do? Right? We did not do the brutal stuff that the Soviets did. Right? We did psychological things to them, social engineering. Right? We taught every child raised in Germany that they were the most evil society that has ever existed, and not just because of the things that happened in the 20th century, but throughout their entire history, right? Not just, well, we can skip back, 100 years back when Germany was good. No. They were always evil, always bad, always horrible, right? We allowed them to rebuild their industry. We paid for all of it. We rebuilt the country, allowed them to have massive wealth. But this program of atomization, of hatred of your heritage, of your ancestors, was instilled upon them. And the point that Dr. Gottfried made was, right, the same social engineering that happened in Germany, happened in France, happened in Italy, has happened in the UK, right, every NATO country, and has happened in the United States. And you see it, right? You see it. Just last Monday was Indigenous Peoples Day, right? Did everyone celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day last Monday? Right, in my conservative small town, there's actually a town just west of us, even more conservative. A friend of mine teaches there at the public school, teaches kindergarten there, and he told me right? And I'm surprised he actually told me this, right? He's usually very apolitical. He's like, did you know on Monday the state made me teach all morning about Indigenous Peoples Day? And the lesson was about how we genocided the Native Americans and did all these horrible things and how Columbus was evil, right? That was the mandated lesson to teach to 5-year-olds, right? To teach to 5-year-olds, right? So you think about that. I've taught in the public school and I've seen the history curriculum, and it isn't just over all the time outright. It's just a little bit there and there. Like, oh, America's kind of bad. Don't forget. And that you're being taught that progressively, year after year after year, your entire life, that your country is evil because of your ancestors. Right, well, what is that? That's the same social engineering project, right? The same project, right? That your people, are responsible for all the social ills of history. So then when they say, you don't get to go to a good college, right? You don't get, right? All these people get all sorts of money. You have to pay reparations, whatever, right? Whatever scam or scheme they do that's on the basis of these things, on the basis of race and ethnicity, right? You're defenseless. Well, I guess we were kind of bad. That's true. All right, here's my wallet. Right, right. That's what you're left with. That's what you're left with when you're told, right? Like Bill Clinton says, we need to import millions and millions of people. Right? You're told, well, I guess we should do that because we're the worst people ever. Right? We're so bad. Right? And so this question of these levels, right? Nation is destroyed, community is destroyed, family is destroyed. Right? It leaves a people vulnerable. It leaves them vulnerable. Right? You don't have those lower levels of authority, lower levels of autonomy to protect a people. So what happens? Right? You have a centralized regime. Right? In Althusius' day, right, his project failed. Right? Why did it fail? Federalism was not adopted throughout Europe, even though you had the social conditions for it perfectly. But centralized states began to dominate, right? Absolute monarchies with kings that ruled by divine right. But could you imagine if Louis XIV had a society like we had today and what he would be able to do to them? Right? If he had the social and political and economic conditions of today, or any of the, the tyrants of the 17th and 18th century. Right? The conditions we have today are absolutely perfect, right? Almost by design for a top-down, centralized regime. Right? Human beings, sinful men, we've always tended toward acquiring centralized power. Right? But the bulwark against that is how God built the world. Right? He built how he designed the world. Right? He could have created man any way he wanted to do it. Right? We could have just been born as adults. Right? We don't have to be babies. Right? We don't have to have moms and dads. We can just come right out of the ground. Right? He didn't do that. We have families. God designed us to have families. And then you have collections of families. Right? He designed the world to be this way. Right? He designed the world to have, right, affections. For us to have affections for a family more than people who are not in our family. And affections for a community that more than people that are not in our community. Right? These are good things. And actually a bulwark against totalitarianism. But a people who are truly atomized, right? Atomized individuals with no connection to other people whatsoever, no families, no broader people, no deep community, no shared loves, no shared way of life, no shared beliefs, no shared faith. Right? They are the perfect subjects for a global totalitarian regime. And so there's a time, I know I'm running out of time here. I'm on my last page, Tim, so hold on. Hold on. All right, there's a kind of Christianity today, Tim brought it up earlier, that has perfectly habituated itself to our conditions today. Right? They want to accommodate the Christian faith to these kind of globalist conditions, just as many seek to accommodate the faith to feminism or homosexuality or any other left-wing ideology. And so this idea, the ordo amoris, right? Ordered affections, right? And maybe you all see the meme with the heat map between liberals and conservatives and how and their differing loves, right? Liberals love people they don't ever have to meet or encounter, right? They don't love their neighbor. But conservatives, especially Christians, they love their neighbors and their families and the people that are closest to them. Like, that's how God built us to be. Right? And that's essentially what the Ordo Amoris is. But their basis for love is the Imago Dei. Right? If you look at it like a Google, on Google, the engrams, with usage of terms, right? Imago Dei really doesn't show up. I mean, it's there in historical theology. It doesn't show up until midpoint of the 20th century, and then it goes like exponential. Right? Wait, weird, huh? Crazy. Right? There's a reason for that. There's a reason, because they say, well, everyone's made in the image of God, so we have to love every single person the same way you love your mother or your child. Right? That's the basis for their adaptation of Christianity to this ideology. Right? You think about someone like David Platt, the aforementioned David Platt, right? Who chastises Christians, right? Who are at this very moment seeing their country destroyed. Right? He puts out right now, you can go to North Carolina and see people living in mud, right? Their houses destroyed, children still cut off from their parents, everything just wiped out. He goes online and says, there's 3 billion people out there that don't know the Lord. You're all so terrible and so bad because you don't care about them. And it's like, we have 80 to 100,000 people in our country dying of fentanyl every year, and you don't care about them at all, right? You don't care about all of the people, all the children who are growing up that don't know their fathers. You don't care about them at all. You won't touch any of this stuff, right? It's much easier to go to some country that people cannot find on a map, because we want to do that. It's easy, right? Oh, give us some money. Okay, there you go. Go give it to people I'll never meet, right? Rather than getting involved in your actual neighbors' lives, right? Those people are dirty, right? Being involved in their lives is messy, very messy, right? We don't need those neighbors. We'll just import new neighbors instead. And so finally, Rabbi, you'll get to eat soon. Finally, right? What are we to do, right? What do we do today? Right, the most important thing to understand today is that the conflict that we're in is not between, right, even left and right. Those terms don't actually really exist. Right? The conflict is between this globalism, right? This idea that this universalism, that all people are all the same everywhere, right? Which is perfect for a global totalitarianism, versus how God built the world, right? That a Christian conception of politics, right, a Reformed conception of politics fits perfectly, hand in glove in, right? That's how we understand these things. We have to understand it in those terms, right? It is a rebellion against how God created human beings to be, right? That's what it is, right? I've made man this way. No. We're going to remake man in our own image. We've forgotten what it means to be human. What it means to be human. Right? Christians, rather, must live in the reality of the created order. And so you must understand that having a family, a household, an actual household, right, with a wife and children, is real politics. It is political. Right? It is real political resistance. They don't want you to have that. Right? Anything but that. Just see how much they lose their minds whenever Joel Webbin says, oh, wife should submit to her husband. What? No! This crazy radical pastor down there in Texas, right? He wants to create the Taliban in America, right? No, it's a good way to live. It's a blessed way to live. I see the families here, right? Everyone's happy and smiling. It's wonderful, right? And it's not something you just do, I'm going to own the libs by having a nice, happy family, right? No, I'm not. That's not what you're doing, right? You're doing it because that's what God created you to do for most people. And of course it does own them. As well, what are we to do? Build actual local communities, right? Where you and your children, your grandchildren can put down deep roots, right? Try to build those things. Try to build businesses for them to work at. Build things where they can stay together in the same place, right? To be able to say that this place, this town in northern Indiana, this is mine. This is my place. Right, it was my grandfather's and my great-grandfather's, right? putting roots down, building real communities, because that is how you stand against these people. They don't want you to have loyalty to your family. They don't want you to have loyalty to your community or to your nation. They want you to have loyalty to your consumer brands. Right? That's all they want. Right? And it's also to love your nation. Right? To know that you are an American, that you love this country and its history, and that you won't argue the morality of our ancestors and our forefathers' actions, right, with those who seek to liquidate it and seek to liquidate us. Right? Just don't even engage in that. I mean, among ourselves, we could say, well, maybe this was bad or maybe that was bad. Right? But with them? No. We're not going to go there. You just hate us. Right? You want to destroy us. We're not going to give you an inch. And so a people that live within this reality, that understand, right, federal politics in the Reformed, right, Protestant sense, right, they are a people that can live within the created order in submission to King Jesus. And so if we want a distinctively Christian politics, we must rebuild these things that have been actively destroyed. Right? We must raise up Christian families. We must build faithful Christian communities. And we must honor our fathers and love them for the inheritance that they left us. And in doing so, we'll have a place where Jesus shall reign once again. Thank you.